Good morning, everybody. Today we are doing 2C.2, which is on translations. We are going to look at the quadratic function, which comes in the form of f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Because my highest exponent on here is a square, I know that this is going to be U-shaped, okay? And so it's a parabola. So a, b, and c have to be real numbers, and a cannot equal 0. So yesterday, or the previous video, we looked at f of x equals x squared, and we got this right here. So what we're going to do is compare other graphs we make to this one right here. Okay, so let's see here. So first one I want to do is f of x equals negative x squared. So the only difference between this one here and this one here is this negative sign right there. All right, so if I put a -2 in there, let's see what happens. I'll do that work over here. So I'll have a negative, I'm replacing the x with a -2, and I'm going to square it. Okay, I square -2, I'll get a +4, and then I have to take the opposite of it, so that's going to be -4. So if I put a -1 in there, square that -1, I'll get a 1, and then the opposite of it, I'll get a -1. And there's 0, 1, if I do that, I'll get a -1. Put a 2, I'll get a -4. All right, let's plot these points. Remember that this is an ordered pair here. So -2, -4, right here. -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 2, -4. And it goes like that. Okay, so that negative sign right there is, well, it reflected it across the x-axis. So it flipped it, right? If it's positive, it's going to open up. If it is negative, it opens down. And remember, a is the number in front of your x squared. So that is your a is positive, and this would be your a is negative right there. Okay, here, when it opens up like that, that is a minimum. It is the lowest point on your graph. Right here, this is the highest point on the graph, and that is your maximum. And it's where it changes from, like this one here, it has a negative slope, and it changes up into a positive slope. So that point right there is your vertex. Okay, this one here, I have a positive slope. It changes slopes and becomes a negative slope. And again, that is your vertex, where it changes slopes like that. So if it opens up, you have a minimum. If it opens down, you have a maximum. All right, let's do a few more. So here's our standard one. This is the f of x equals x squared, our standard. And we're gonna put a 1/2 in front here and a 2 in front there, and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to do this one here in red. See what happens when we put the 1/2 in there. All right, so if I have f of x equals 1/2, then I'm putting a -2 in when I see that x and square it. Okay, we have to follow the order of operations, so I have to do this exponent first. So -2 times -2 gives me a +4. 4 times that 1/2 will give me a 2. Okay, so f of x will be a 2. All right, if I put a -1 in there and square it, I'll get a 1, then times it by the 1/2, so that'll be 1/2. Put a 0 in there, square it, I'll get a 0. 0 times the 1/2 will give me 0. And then this one here will be 1/2, and this one here will be 2. Okay, so let's plot it up here and see what happens. Okay, so -2, 2. -1 is at 1/2, 0, 0, 1 is at 1/2, and 2 is at 2. All right, it's wider. So when you get a number that is in between 0, remember it cannot equal 0. That was part of our rules up front, that this cannot be 0. So if it is in between 0 and 1, it gets wider. Again, let's see what happens when we put a 2 in there. I'm going to change colors here. Okay, so I put a 2 up front there. So now I have an f of x equals 2 times -2 squared. Okay, again, we have to follow the order of operations and do this part here first. So -2 squared will give me a +4, and that 4 times that 2 is going to give me an 8. So that is an 8. Put a -1 in there, square it, I'll get a 1 times the 2. It's 2. A 0 in there will be 0, and this will be 2, and an 8. All right, let's plot those points. -2 is at 8. Okay, all right, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I have -1 is at 2, right there, and 0, 0, 1, 2, 2, 8. So it looks like that. So if your number, the bigger the number up here, it gets narrow. Because think about it, we're taking our answer and we're multiplying it by whatever number it is here. So that's going to get bigger really fast. So what do you think would happen if I had like a 4 there? Okay, if I had a 4 there, wouldn't it get even narrower? Okay, so keep that in mind, and that's your A up front, okay, A. Now we're going to look at some vertical translations here. Okay, so here's our standard one. That's your f of x equals x squared. And now what we're going to do is I'm adding 2 on there. So I'm going to take what my answer was and add 2 to it. So let's put -2 in here. So I would have -2 squared, then +2. That will give me a 4. +2 gives me a 6. All right, let's put a -1 in there. So that'll give me a 1 + 2. That gives me a 3. Put a 0 in there. That'll give me a 2. Put a 1 in there. So that'll give me a 3. Put a 2 in there. That gives me 4 + 2 gives me a 6. Okay, let's graph that and see what happened. So -2 is here, then 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right there. -1, 3. 1, 2, 3. 0, 2. 1, 3. 2, 6. It moved up 2. Every one of these points on this black one here shifted up 2. So that 2 shifts up 2. Okay. Let's take a look at this next one over here. So f of x equals x squared minus 3. Okay, so I'm going to do this one here in the blue. Let's see what that -3 does to our normal parabola. Okay, so if I put a -2 in there, I'm going to square it, and then I'm going to subtract the 3. So -2 squared gives me a 4 minus the 3, that's going to give me a 1. All right, so if I put a -1 in there and I square it, I'll get a 1. Then minus the 3, that'll give me a -2. Put a 0 in there, I get a -3. Put a 1 in there, so that'd be 1 minus 3, that gives me a -2. Put a 2 in there, that'll give me a 4 minus 3, it gives me a 1. Okay, so let's graph it on here, see what happened. -2 is at 1. -1 is at -2. 0 is at -3. 1 is at -2. And 2 is at 1. And there we go. It shifted down 3. See, every one of these points moved down 3. 1, 2, 3, right here. If I had a point right here, 1, 2, 3. My point right here, 1, 2, 3. Every one of those points moved down 3. So when I have a problem like this, here's, like my standard right here, and it says +2 in the back here, that's where it goes up to. If I have my standard right here, my standard family type thing, and this one goes down 3. And this works for the other families that we learned about, like this one here. Okay, so since I have a cube, that's that S-shaped one like that, right? And it add 2 to it. So if it was normally like, like this right there, and I add 2 to it, so normally it would go through right there. Well, now it's going to go through up there at 2. So it'll be like that. It shifted everything up 2. This one here would normally look like this, right? Well, it says it's going to go down 1, so it'll go down there, then go like this. It takes what we'd normally have, moves it up or down. Okay, so this one here would be V-shaped like that. Well, now on this one here, it would go up 3 and be a V-shaped up there. This one here is our straight line, normally goes like that. Well, now it said move it up 1, so instead of going through here, it's going to go through here and go like that. All right, so if it's tagged on the back, that's the one that does the up or down. That's a vertical translation. So now let's look at horizontal translations. Okay, so this one here, here's our standard again. So y equals x squared right there. And let's take a look at what happens to these over here. So this first one here, let me change colors. We have this 2. Now notice it is inside parentheses being squared. It's not just tagged on the back. It's inside those parentheses. Okay, so let's put a -2 in there, and I'll do that work here. So -2 plus 2, and then we're going to square it. Okay, remember we have to do the work inside the parentheses first and then square. So that gives me a 0. 0 squared is 0. There we go. Okay, let's put a -1 in there. So -1 plus the 2 will give me a +1. Square it, that'll give me a 1. Let's put a 0 in there. So I'll have 0 plus 2 gives me 2. Square it gives me a 4. Put a 1 in there. That'll give me a 3. Square it gives me 9. Well, this is getting way off of my graph now. So let's stop going that direction and let's go the other direction now. So instead of doing 2, I need to do what? Let's try a -3 and a -4. See what happens with that. Okay, so if I put a -3 in here, -3 plus 2 will give me a -1. Square that -1, I'll get a 1. Let's put a -4 in there. -4 plus 2 will give me a -2. Take that -2, square it, and you'll get a +4. All right, let's put these on here now. -2 is at 0. So -2 is at 0 right there. -1 is at 1 right there. 0 is at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. 1 is at 9 right there. -3 is at 1. 1, 2, 3 is at 1. -4 is at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so notice it moved to the left 2 places. Every one of these points moved over 2. And over here moved over 2. So, you might want to think, oh, it's going in the positive direction, but no, it's actually going in the opposite direction that you wanted to. So this one shifts to the left. All right. So what do you think is going to happen down here? It's going to probably go the other direction, right? Okay, let's take a look at this one. Let's put a -2 in there. So that'll give me a -2 minus 3, and we're going to square it. That gives me a -5. Square it, that's going to give me a 25. That is way off my graph, okay? -1 in there, that will give me a -4. Square it, 16. That's still way off my graph. Put a 0 in there. That gives me a -3, square it gives me 9. Oh, we'll put that one on there. 1 minus 3 is going to give me a -2, square it gives me a 4. Put a 2 in there, that's going to give me a -1, square it gives me a 1. Okay, we're going to need to add a few more here because we haven't seen it start going up yet. So let's do a 3, a 4, and a 5. If I put a 3 in there, that gives me 0, 0 squared is 0. Put a 4 in there, that'll give me a 1, square it gives me a 1. Put a 5 in there, 5 minus 3 gives me a 2, square it gives me a 4. Okay, so let's put this on up here and let's see what happens. Those guys are way off. 0 is at 9, which will be right here. 1 is at 4, which is right there. 2 is at 1. Oops, 2's at 1 right there. 3 is at 0. 4 is at 1. 5 is at 4. Okay, so this one will look like that. So every one of these points here went over 3. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, this one here, 1, 2, 3, right there. So we're comparing it to the black one. So this one here, 1, 2, 3. So it shifts 3 to the right. So when it is inside the parentheses and you're, being controlled basically by that exponent out there, that's where it is going to be going left and right and the opposite of what you want it to do. Okay, so this works the exact same way for these guys here as well. If it is underneath the radical, okay, so let's have our standard right here. Our standard would be like this. So I'll do this one here. This one would shift 1 to the right and go like that. Okay, this one here, standard would look like that, but this time I have a +3 there, so it would be 1, 2, 3, and it would be like that. Okay, so inside or underneath is where it is going to go left and right, so our horizontal translations, and an opposite of what you want it to do. And here is the page with the actual rules on it. So if your A is positive, it opens up. If your A is negative, it opens down. All right, and here's our translations. let h plus and k be positive numbers. And here's if we wanted to graph it and how it would shift. So here's our standard here, plus k, so plus, that means it's going to go up k units. Notice it's in the back, it's not inside the parentheses. And then if I had minus k, it's tagged on in the back. It means it goes down k units. All right, so this time inside the parentheses, so x minus h all squared, that is going to go to the right h units, x plus h all squared, left h units. And if you think about it, we can actually get our vertex. Remember what that vertex is and how it moves around. So vertex is going to be a x minus h squared plus k. Okay, so remember the a tells me if it's opening up or down. This h is the opposite, and this one here is the same. So our vertex will actually be hk. So if we get it in that form, we can just look at it and move it around using that. So this is vertex form up here. All right, so let's take a look at this one here. Here's our standard one right here, what our radical looks like, the shooting star. I want to go through a few of these. All right, let's look at this and see what happens when I have that negative right there. And I put this in over here, so I'll have the opposite square root of negative 4. Square root of negative 4, we said we can't do that, so it's the opposite of does not exist. Where am I going to find that up there? I can't do it. It still does not exist. And this one will be does not exist. Put a 0 in there, you're going to get a 0. 0 can be positive or negative, okay? I put a 1 in there, so the square root, well, let me write this down. This will be the square root of, oops, just a 1. Let me redo that there. Square root of 1. Okay, what is the square root of 1? Well, that's 1, and then I do the opposite of it, so that's going to equal negative 1. Put a 4 in there, so that's going to be the opposite of the square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. The opposite of it will give me negative 2. All right, let's plot those points. 0, 0, 1, negative 1, and 4, negative 2. So it goes like that, okay? That's what we thought it would do, right? It just flips it across the x-axis. Actually, it's reflect across x-axis. All right, so that does that. So let's find out what happens when I have a negative under there. So if I were to do that work, I would have square root of the opposite of negative 4, which gives me the square root of a positive 4, right? Because the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. And square root of 4 is 2. Okay, so if I do this work, it'll be the opposite of negative 1, which is 1. Take the square root of that. That'll give me a 1. A 0 is going to be 0. All right, let's try this one again. So I have square root of the opposite, and here's my x at 1. That gives me a negative 1 underneath, so that one does not exist. And if I do this with the 4, it'll give me a negative 4 down there, so that does not exist. So I can't do these guys here. So at negative 4, it's at 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Negative 1, it's at 1. And 0, 0. So this one went that way. So having that negative under there reflected it across the y-axis. Okay, let's take a look at this one over here. Now I have the opposite of the square root of negative x. So I'm going to take my answers over here and do the opposite of it. So this one here would actually give me a -2, a -1, a 0, and these guys here are still going to be does not exist. Oops, I should have done that in a different color. We're doing it in blue. Okay, so -4, -2. -1, -1. 0, 0. So this one went like that. So depending on where your negative signs are, depends what's going to happen. Okay, so if it's way up front, it reflects it across the x-axis. If it's inside, it reflects it across the y. And if you got both of them, it reflects it across the x and the y and ends up down over here. All right, that is it for 2C. Have a great day.